By 1888, Russia was on a trajectory to becoming a hegemon not only in Europe or Asia, but also in the Americas. Under Alexander II, the economy of the empire began growing on an unprecedented pace. In Russian Alaska, vast deposits of gold were found. The citizens of the American countries did not want to be completely left behind, so as a result of some negotiations, the imperial government signed a collective economic agreement, allowing North American companies to mine the Alaskan gold while also abiding by guarantees of free and fair economic competition. The exploitation of Alaskan resources provided the needed money to begin the industrialization of the core Russian homeland. This did not go unnoticed by outside observers, mainly France, who was looking to break its diplomatic isolation by forcing Germany to focus itself on multiple fronts, and Germany, who wanted to avoid such a scenario. In April of 1889, the emperor made the decision that the only response to the possibility of the threat of war from Germany's side was a further centralization of the realm, resulting in the Baltic lands losing all autonomy. The following year, it was decided to tighten military security in the area of the Lithuanian Governorate. Elsewhere in the world, France and Britain were conquering the last unmolested lands in Africa and India. The complete conquest of Africa by the French was ended by end of the 19th century, and the total subjugation of India by the British by the 1900s too. Meanwhile, in the Caucasus, the Russian army conquered Meshkin-Shah. In 1890, the fate of Italy was decided when the French promised to support the northern Italian state in its quest to unify the Italian peninsula, leading directly to the wiping out of the papacy off the face of the map. Seeing Russia modernize and France using its influence in Europe, the Germans began crafting their own plans to damage the internal stability of their enemies. In 1894, the Japanese made their first major move on the world stage by taking the island of Formosa from the Chinese. Alexander II died unexpectedly in 1894, leaving his untrained and inexperienced son, Nicholas II, to inherit the throne. His reign started off with a tragedy, when at his coronation, over 1,000 people died in a stampede when rumors spread that there would not be enough free food and drink at the event. This event at Kodinka Field and its aftermath have stoked strong anti-Tsarist sentiments all over the Russian heartland. However, the first rebellion would come not from the Russians themselves, but from the Russian periphery, from Central Asia. Unhappy with the new taxes, they locals have risen up in revolt. It was brutally put down in the same year it began. This was a great opportunity for Germany, helped another peripheral rebellion spark, this time in the Caucasus. The evidence for German involvement was that among many dead rebels, there were German weapons and ammunition. The Cuban Cossacks also rose up. The same year, 1897, a socialist uprising began in the city of Tsaritsyn, led by possibly the youngest revolutionary in Russia, Boris Savinkov, at the age of just 18. This revolt was also put down relatively quickly. Another revolt sparked in Moscow, led by a certain 27-year-old Vladimir Ulyanov. His revolt was put down quickly too. Unlike Savinkov, who managed to evade capture, Ulyanov was cornered in his HQ, and was found dead, the cause of death being his own firearm. But that did not discourage revolutionaries from rising up just outside of Moscow, as futile as their attempt was too. These brief 4 years became known as Two Thing. For the Russian state it was the Black 4 Years. For Republicans of all ideologies this became the black chapter of the revolutionary cause. After the uprisings ceased, it was decided to lower taxes, which yielded results. Nevertheless, when evidence was produced of German aid to some of these uprisings, Russian geopolitical trajectory was now set in stone. It will be committed to becoming France's strongest ally. In 1898, the final Italian unification war began, with Milan coming out on top, as was predicted by many. The Kingdom of Italy was now a thing, and more importantly, an ally of France. To try protect their possession of the Suez Canal, in the year 1900, the British sponsored a rebellion in Egypt, but the rebellion was quickly put down. The same year, the Free Balkan countries formalized their alliance, colloquially known as the Balkan League. Emperor Nicholas II was keen on continuing his father's policy of centralizing the state, resulting in Alaska losing all of its autonomy, which also meant that the decade-old agreement with the colonial administration and American states were now null and void, angering their statesmen. The next year, news broke out of war in Europe. The Balkan League was at war with Hungary. Naturally, the Russians provided full support to the League, which greatly helped in the Serbs, Croats, and Romanians in achieving victory over the Magyars, resulting in the Slovak state of Jepids returning onto the map. In 1903, in response to the self-evident rise in the influence of the Entente, the alliance of France, Russia, and Italy, the Parliament of Great Britain introduced the Act of Union, meaning that Great Britain and the island of Ireland were now one country, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and the city of Calais. The next year, it was made official. Russia was now officially in the Entente, rather than just an informal partner. 1904 for Russia was also marked by the beginning of a war with the Korean Empire, agreeing with China and Japan to divide the territory among themselves. Manchuria was conquered with ease, as the Korean army was still very much medieval. Having gotten what it wanted, Russia left the war, leaving the Japanese and Chinese to fight them on their own. The Chinese and Japanese managed to defeat the Koreans the next year, having been unable to inflict a total defeat on the Korean Imperial Army, resulting in their government only being forced to hand over some minor territory. This was seen as a major humiliation by the Japanese public, which blamed the Russians for leaving the war too soon, allowing the Korean army to focus on them and the Chinese. That same year, in November, a crisis began in the imperial government, with many officials and politicians demanding an expansion of voting rights. There were only 3 real options laid down before the emperor. Option 1 was proposed by Stolypin, which would be to forcefully leave things as is, with a limited franchise in which the vote of a noble or a wealthy man was worth more than the vote of a peasant or worker. Option 2 was proposed by the Constitutional Democrats, which would be to accept universal male suffrage, with all votes being equal. The third option, proposed by the far-right monarchists of the Union of the Russian People, was to abolish the system that was causing so many problems and internal divisions. The Tsar sided with the URP. Absolute monarchy returned to Russia.